business leaders are here in Lubbock meeting right now to talk about the impact of AI data centers. The Lubbock Chamber of Commerce is hosting a program at the Texas Tech Club looking at how data centers affect the power grid, water usage, local jobs, and tax dollars. Panelists include former Texas Land Commissioner George P. Bush, Texas Tech's Chancellor Brandon Creighton, and some local economic leaders and a representative from Google. That hour-long discussion, including an audience Q&A session, is underway right now. KCBD News Channel 11's Dylan Villa will tell us more about today's meeting in our later newscast.